KSJE and the Farmington Public Library present Cuentos Hahne and Tales.
Hello, my name is Beth Troxell, and I am from the Farmington Public Library, and I am here to read you some books from our collection. The first book that I have picked out is called The Rock Maiden, a Chinese tale of love and loyalty, written by Natasha Yim. And I'd like to read you just a little bit on the back of what she wrote about this. This is it's about the legend of the Amo Rock. And it's based on an old Chinese legend. The real rock is called the Amo Rock in the Sha-Tin area of Hong Kong. It is a natural granite rock formation shaped amazingly like a woman with a baby on her back. It stands 50 feet high and sits on a hill 820 feet above the sea level. Citizens and visitors to Hong Kong can hike up to the rock, where they will have a tremendous view of the Sha-Tin and the surrounding hills. So this is a story that she wrote based on this, but she said that when she sat down to write the story, she felt that it was too sad to end it with a young maiden being turned into a rock, so she re-envisioned the story with a happier ending. So we'll see how this story ends. So this is called The Rock Maiden, written by Natasha Yim. There once was a beautiful maiden named Ling Yi. She lived in Hong Kong, a fishing village on the southern coast of China. All the young men in the village wanted to marry her, but Ling Yi loved Chen Yin, a young fisherman. She was touched by his kindness. He often helped the old men pull in their boats and haul in their fish. The couple married, and after a while, a son was born. The whole village celebrated the birth. There was food, dancing, and lighting of firecrackers. One morning, Chen Yin and the other fishermen set out as usual. They rowed out to sea in their small wooden sampans. By mid-afternoon, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Rain fell from the sky in thick sheets. The sea beat its angry fist upon the shore. Finally, the clouds parted. The boats were drifting to land. Relieved, wives ran to greet their husbands. Ling Yi asked each exhausted fireman, "Have you seen Ching Lin?" But each shook his head. "It was impossible to see," said one. "The waves were so huge," cried another. "I thought I was fighting a giant sea serpent." The last battered sampan whirled in, but Chen Yin was not in it. Ling Yi's heart sank. She could not let herself believe that he had drowned. Maybe he found somewhere to wait out the storm, she thought. Every morning, Ling Yi put her baby on her back. Then she hiked to the top of a hill overlooking the ocean. There, she would scan the horizon for her husband. But Chen Yin's sampan never came. At the end of each day, she would return to her hut. Her parents and the other villagers tried to talk her into giving up her vigil. "No," she cried. "Chen Yin will come home soon." But this went on for many moons. The men talked about the night of the terrible storm. The women lamented. What will happen to Ling Ying and her baby? The children whispered about the strange woman on the hill. The young woman's parents were heartbroken over Ling Yi's grief. They pleaded with Tin Hong, the patron goddess of fishermen, for help. "Please bring Ching Yin home. Have pity on our daughter's sorrow," they prayed. Ling Yi's lonely figure on the cliff day after day touched Tin Ha's heart. One day she decided that they would mourn no more. With the clap of her hands, Tin Ha sent a lightning bolt to the ground. Crack! It turned Ling Yi and her baby into stone. Ling Yi now stood on top of the cliff looking out to sea. her stony shape patiently waiting for the return of her husband. The villagers began to call her the Rock Maiden. From time to time they would lay flowers at her feet. One day, about a year later, a stranger appeared in the village. He had a beard, scruffy clothes, and a knapsack on his back. He asked the villagers where he could find Lin Yi. An old man stepped out of the crowd. His back was hunched and his face lined with sadness. "You are obviously not from these parts, stranger," the old man said. "Why do you look for Lin Yi?" The stranger put his hand on the other man's shoulder. "Do you not recognize me?" the young man asked. "I am Chen Yin. I have come home." The astounded villagers crowded around. They wanted to hear a story. He said that his sampan had been overturned by ferocious waves. Finally, he found himself washed up on the shores of a faraway village. "I had no money, and I didn't know where I was. It has taken me a year to make my way home," he explained. The old man then told Chen Yin what had happened to his wife and child. He pointed sadly to the rock on top of the cliff. Chen Yin hurried to the Rock Maiden. He stared at the stony shape of his wife and baby. Weeping bitterly, he fell to his knees. But high in the heavens, Tin Ha once again took pity on this young family. With another clap of her hands, she sent out a bolt of lightning through the clouds. Crack! It struck the Rock Maiden. The rock split open. There appeared Lin Yi and her son. Astounded, they all rushed to embrace each other. That evening, the whole village rejoiced. Firecrackers sparkled and popped. People danced and feasted, and songs praising the mercy of Tin Ha floated up into the air. Gently, the Queen of the Heavens gathered and folded them into the night sky. So that was the story of the Rock Maiden, a Chinese tale of love and loyalty, written by Natasha Yim. So now we are going to go to another book. Now this book is fun because it has different types of stories in it. It's called Tales from Around the World, perfect for sharing, and it was called Once There Was a Story, and this is by Jane Yolen. So what she did is she collected different stories from around the world and put it in a book. So this section here is Homey Tales, but the introduction says, "How to love a story. Read it out loud. Let it melt in the mouth. There is magic between the mouth and ear when a story is involved, especially if it is your mouth in a child's ear. I know this magic well. When my own children were young, folk tales and fairy tales were staples in our house, so when I was discussing this book with my editor, I wanted to be sure some of our old favorites were retold here. That is why you have retellings of many familiar folk tales. These are stories that are short, full of remarkable characters, and infinitely retellable and fit for children between 3 and 5 years of age. I hope as you read them with a child on your lap, or snuggling next to you in bed, or sitting with young friends at your feet, their eager faces falling under the story spell, I hope that you love the stories as well as they do. And this was a note from Jane Yolen. So the first section is Homey Tales. And so I picked one of the stories in there that's called The Turnip. And this is a Russian story. Old Mishka planted a turnip. The turnip grew and grew. It grew so big it had to be harvested. So old Mishka started to pull the turnip out of the ground. He pulled and pulled, but the turnip would not come out. Old Misha called over his wife. "Old Misha, put your arms around me and pull," he said. Old Misha took hold of old Mishka. Old Mishka took hold of the turnip. Then they pulled and pulled, but they couldn't pull the turnip out. Old Mishka called her granddaughter Tasha. "Put your arms around me and pull," she said. So Tasha took hold of old Masha. Old Masha took hold of old Mishka. Old Mishka took hold of the turnip, and they pulled and pulled, but couldn't pull the turnip out. Tasha called over the dog Sasha. "Put your paws around me and pull," she said. So Sasha took hold of Tasha. Tasha took hold of old Masha. Old Masha took hold of old Mishka. Old Mishka took hold of the turnip. Then they pulled and pulled, but couldn't pull the turnip out. Then dog Sasha called over to the cat Kasha. "Put your paws around me and pull," he said. So Kasha took hold of Sasha. Sasha took hold of Tasha. Then Tasha took hold of old Masha. Old Masha took hold of old Mishka. Old Mishka took hold of the turnip. Then they pulled and pulled, but couldn't pull the turnip out. The cat Kasha called over to the mouse Pishka. "Put your paws around me and pull," she said. So Pishka took hold of Kasha. Kasha took hold of Sasha. Sasha took hold of Tasha. Tasha took hold of old Masha. Old Masha took hold of old Mishka. Old Mishka took hold of the turnip. Then they pulled and pulled, but they couldn't pull the turnip out. The mouse Pishka called over to the flea Satka. "Put your legs around me and pull," he said. So Satka took hold of Pishka. Pishka took hold of Kasha. Kasha took hold of Sasha. Sasha took hold of Tasha. Tasha took hold of old Masha. Old Masha took hold of old Mishka. Old Mishka took hold of the turnip. Then Zatka, Pishka, Kasha, Sasha, Tasha, Masha, and Mishka pulled and pulled and pulled some more, and whoop! The turnip came right out. The moral is, sometimes it takes just one flea more than everyone is on the floor. So this story is from England, and this is from the book Once There Was a Story by Jane Yolen. These are retellings of folk tales. This one in this book is called Lazy Jack, and it is from England. Once upon a time, a boy named Jack lived with his mother in a small house. They were poor as poor could be, and his mother made barely enough for the two of them by spinning. But all Jack did was sit outside with the sun on his face in the summer and sit close to the hearth fire in the winter. So he was called Lazy Jack by all who knew him. Now, Monday morning, tired from doing all the work while Jack lazed around, his mother said, "If you do not begin to work for your porridge, my boy, you will have to leave this house for good." And she meant it. So Jack went out and told a neighboring farmer that he'd work all day for just a penny. In those days, a penny was a good wage. But as Jack had never been given a penny before, he lost it in a brook when going home for supper. Poor Jack! "You lazy boy," cried his mother. "You should have put the penny in your pocket." "I'll do it the next time," said Jack. The next day, he went out again and hired out to a cowherd who gave him a jar of milk for his day's work. Remembering what his mother had told him, Jack put the jar in the pocket of his jacket. But of course, it was spilled before he got home. Poor Jack! "You silly boy," said his mother. "You should have carried it balanced on your head." "I'll do it next time," said Jack. Well, the next day he hired out to another farmer, and this one gave him a packet of cream cheese to pay for his work. Remembering what his mother had said, he balanced it on his head. By the time he got home, half the cheese had fallen off and the rest had melted into his hair. Poor Jack. "You foolish boy," said his mother. "You should have carried it carefully in your hands." "I'll do it the next time," said Jack. The very next day, Jack hired out to a baker, who gave him a large tomcat for his day's work. Remembering what his mother had told him, he began to carry it home carefully in his hands. But the cat was not happy in his hands, and it scratched Jack so badly he dropped it by the wayside, and the cat ran away. Poor Jack. "You dippy boy," said his mother. "You should have tied it with a string and dragged it behind you." "I'll do it next time," said Jack. Friday, Jack went to work for her butcher, who paid him well with a handsome steak. Remembering what his mother had told him, Jack tied a string around the meat and dragged it along behind. He pulled it through the dirt, through the mud, and over a briar hedge. But by the time he reached his home, the meat was thoroughly spoiled. Poor Jack. "Oh, you ninny hammer," said his mother, for now she was quite out of patience. "You should have carried it on your shoulder." "I'll do it next time," said Jack. Well, wouldn't you know it, the next day Jack went to work for a cattle farmer, who gave him a donkey for all his hard work. Remembering what his mother had told him, Jack hoisted the donkey on top of his shoulder, which was very hard to do, and slowly, oh, so slowly, he walked home with his reward. Now along the road lived a very rich man who had a beautiful daughter named Jean, who'd never laughed and had long since lost her power to speak. Fearing for her life, 7 doctors and 6 nurses all said that if she could laugh, she would be well again. At that very moment, Jean was gazing out of her window, a sad look on her face. And what did she see but Jack walking by ever so slowly with the donkey carried on his shoulder, its legs sticking right up in the air. It was so funny. She began to laugh and laugh and laugh so loudly that her father and mother, the 7 doctors and 6 nurses, all came running to see what that strange noise was. "Father, Mother," said Jean, suddenly able to speak again, "look out the window. Have you ever seen anything so funny?" They all looked, and then they all laughed with Jean. The rich man ran outside at once and brought back Jack, though they left the donkey at the door. "I will give you anything you wish, for you have saved my daughter's life." Well, Jack took one look at the rich man's daughter, and he knew what the wish was. Though he wasn't sure if he was to carry her in his pocket, balance her on his head, take her in his hands, tie a string around her, or put her on his shoulder. And when he asked, everyone laughed even more. "You won't have to take her anywhere," said the rich man. "You can live right here." So Jack and Jean were married, and he and his mother moved into the big house. The house rang with laughter from that day till this, and every one of them lived a long and happy life. And the moral is to have a happy ever after. Make sure your house is filled with laughter. Okay, I have one more. There's still a lot of stories in this book, but this one is one that you're probably familiar with. It is from England also. It is a classic. It's called The Little Red Hen. So as I'm reading it, feel free to say it along with me. Once, long ago, there was a little red hen who worked all day long in the yard. Scratch, scratch. One day she found a grain of wheat. If I plant it, it will grow, she thought. Then she turned to her friends. Who will help me plant the wheat? Not I, said the duck. Not I, said the pig. Not I, said the dog. They all preferred playing to work. Never mind, said the little red hen. I shall plant it myself. And she did. All that summer the wheat grew. First it was a little green shoot. Then it was a great big stalk. Under the summer sun it turned golden yellow. Now my wheat is ripe, said the little red hen. Who will help me cut it? Not I, said the duck. Not I, said the pig. Not I, said the dog. They all preferred playing to work. Never mind, said the little red hen. I shall cut it myself. And she did. Now it was time to thresh the wheat. Who will help me thresh it? Said the little red hen. Not I, said the duck. Not I, said the pig. Not I, said the dog. They all preferred playing to work. Never mind, said the little red hen. I shall thresh it myself. And she did. Now it was time to take the threshed wheat to the mill. Who will help me carry it to the mill? Asked the little red hen. Not I, said the duck. Not I, said the pig. Not I, said the dog. They all preferred playing to work. Never mind, said the little red hen. I shall carry it there myself. And she did. The miller ground the wheat into the finest flour, and the little red hen carted it home. Who will help me make the bread? She asked. Not I, said the duck. Not I, said the pig. Not I, said the dog. They all preferred playing to work. Never mind, said the little red hen. I shall make it myself. And she did. She mixed the flour with water and salt. She kneaded the dough and pounded it. She shaped it into a loaf. Then she put the loaf into the oven. Soon the smell of baking bread filled the barnyard. Who will help me eat the bread? Asked the little red hen. I will, said the duck. I will, said the pig. I will, said the dog. They all preferred eating to work. The little red hen shook her head. You didn't help me plant the wheat, or cut it, or thresh it, or carry it to the mill. You did not help me mix it, or knead it, or pound it, or shape it, or bake it in the oven. She took the bread to her table and sat down. She tied a napkin around her neck. So I shall eat it all by myself. And she did. And the moral is, share the work each time you meet, and you will share good things to eat. So that was the story of the little red hen. So these were stories out of the book Once There Was a Story by Jane Yolen, illustrated by Jane Dyer. This is Beth from the Farmington Public Library. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you did, feel free to come by to the Farmington Public Library and check out our collection, or you can go to our online website at www.infoway.org to check out our catalog or our programs. Thank you so much for listening.
This has been Cuentos Hahne and Tales, presented by the Farmington Public Library and KSJE 90.9 FM.